to your legislative representative who did not vote in support of this piece of legislation.
Telling me his wife and kids and then telling me about his great gay life in Palm Springs prior to that while he was checking me out physically. So it would seem to me that
Okay. We'll wait for. We'll start and then hope for Sean to be here while his name is being called. So it's 3:02 on October 15th, Monday, of the Architectural Advisory Committee meeting. We ask everyone to silence your cell phones. Planning Director, if we can have roll call.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Member Cassidy?
Present.
Member Dosey?
Present.
Member Lockyer? Member McCoy?
Present.
Member Rotman?
Present.
Vice Chair Jakeway?
Present.
Chair Song?
Present.
We have a quorum.
You. May we have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, October the 11th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Does the committee have any revisions to today's agenda?
Madam Chair, I will be abstaining from item number 2 of the consent agenda.
Okay, so we will move first to the meeting minutes. I'm sorry, move to accept the agenda. Do we have a motion?
Move to accept the agenda.
Okay, anyone second?
Second.
Second by Member Kenny by a hair. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Okay, since this is the public meeting, audience members are permitted to comment on any issue that is within this committee's purview. Is anyone here to discuss about any item that is not on today's agenda? Okay, so we'll move forward to the meeting minutes from the last few weeks. I'm going to start with minutes of June 18th, 2018.
It looks like the 4 people who were present at that meeting are not all present here, so I think we might have to pass that one again.
So we will have to postpone those minutes to a later meeting. We will so note on the record.
Okay, let's try minutes of September 4.
That one I will recuse myself from because I was not present.
4. We have 4 from the 4 members. Actually 5. So any comments on September 4th?
I move to accept the meeting minutes.
Let's see, actually, Madam Chair, if we could hold off on the motion until we have reviewed all the consent calendar items, and then we'll do it by one motion.
Okay, but Member Robert, we know that.
We will note the abstentions on those items accordingly.
So on September 4th, Member Robert is good. I'm good. Anyone else have any? If not, then let's move to September 17 minutes.
We also have enough members available to vote on those minutes today as well. Noting the abstentions of members Cassidy and McCoy.
Okay. By the way, Flynn, thank you so much for these notes. That was a tough meeting. Okay, so right now, minutes of September 14th and 17th. There any other comments?
Okay. Madam Chair, seeing that there are no comments on the minutes, we'll go ahead and under one vote on the consent calendar, we will be approving the minutes of September 4th and September 17th. Were there any comments on item number 2 also on the consent agenda?
Yes, I have only one comment about the roofing material of the new addition to match the existing homes.
So we can go ahead and do that as a staff condition as long as there are no other comments on the application.
Are there any other comments? Yes, Member.
I worked on this project with the previous owner, and there is a easement along the side of this property that provides access to a large undeveloped piece of land that's west of the houses on Rose. I think that easement should be considered a street as we look at setbacks and how this guest house relates to that portion of the property.
Okay.
And it appears that they have complied with the side yard setback. So I'm just uncertain in our development plan where we have a corner lot, what is the setback from the side yard street, not from the front street?
Okay. Let's see, Mr. Lyon, are you available to answer that question?
Sure. The easement that you mentioned is acknowledged on the site plan and does run along the southerly boundary of the property. when you look at the setback that's been proposed off the side, and I have to pull my glasses off here a minute to see this, it's
10 foot.
32 feet. So the home does set back essentially 32 feet from that setback, but is also setting back roughly.
Well, it looks to me like it's set back 10 feet from
Yes, I believe it's set back 10 feet from the northerly edge of that right-of-way.
And that complies with our code for.
Yes.
Corner. Great, thank you very much.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, if there are no other questions, then it's appropriate to now take a motion on the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to accept? Member John? Microphone.
Motion to accept the consent calendar as noted.
In the meeting minutes, yeah. Anyone second that?
Second.
You? All those in?
Question.
Yeah.
Does that include your comment?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Right, yeah. Good.
Okay, so the items are approved. We will note the abstentions of Member Cassidy on the September 4th minutes and Members Cassidy and McCoy on the September 17th minutes, and the abstention of Member Dosey on item number 2. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
so if you're here for any item on the consent calendar, we have just accepted. So therefore, unless you want to stay with us and join us, you don't have to. Okay, so having said that, we're going to new business. Jewish Community Center of Palm Springs for a minor architectural application to replace turf and drought-tolerant landscape at 332 West Alejo Road. Staff report, please.
Madam Chair, were you going to take unfinished business first?
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped that. Okay, we're going to go back up to unfinished business number 3. The City of Palm Springs owner for the revisions to the proposed restoration of the courtyard at the Wellwood Memorial Library on 100 South Palm Canyon Drive. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As noted in your staff report, the city has been working on restoration of the Wellwood Murray Memorial Library since about 2010. The restoration of the courtyard is the final phase of this project, and the city, the library board and the HSPB have reviewed the project. As noted in your staff report, there was a landscape design for this courtyard developed by Volks Design, which is in your packet for review. The subcommittees of the library and the HSPB met on June 27th under the staff guidance of Chief City Engineer Thomas Garcia to review the design and to look at the recommendations that were put forward from a report that was produced by Stephen Kalon, an architectural historian. The HSPB had requested this report because they understood that the library, as a historic building and a historic site, did have some type of existing condition in that courtyard, and they asked the library board to seek additional information on what that original configuration may have been and what would be appropriate from that original design, if anything, to carry forward. In your staff report on page 2, Library Director Jeannie Kays has given us basically a functional program of how they see or envision this outdoor space as functioning. Everything from it providing ADA access to the building to small events, special events for outside groups, and basically just quiet contemplation and reading books and so on. On page 3 of your staff report is the basic history of events that have been involved in this project thus far. On page 4, we talk about what the actual scope of the project is in the Volts design. It's a drought-tolerant landscaping, it's hardscaping and paving that will basically is aligned in a contemporary pattern reflective of some of the work that's been done in the new project diagonally across the street in the downtown. It also is intended to provide control gates at the courtyard for securing the space after hours, some site furnishings, site lighting, and screening and acoustical control of existing air conditioning units that are in that courtyard. The historic assessment that is outlined in the Kalon report attached to your staff report identifies that although this building did have, so we do have some information about how the courtyard was arranged when it was first constructed. The courtyard as it exists today is essentially has lost all of its historic integrity and features that were there at the time of its original construction. Not only that, but in terms of its actual context and surroundings, the report and the photos indicated as being sort of an open and sunny patio. It's now fairly landlocked by taller buildings and is in shade most of the year. There are some historic photos in the Kalon report that I'm referencing in this that you'll also see. So the goals of this review, as noted on page 5, is to seek from the AAC recommendations on what portions of the Kalon report might be appropriate to bring into the design, what aspects of the current Volz design might be reasonable and appropriate to remain. The primary issues or differences, if you will, between the library board and the HSPB is one of design aesthetic, if you will. There are certain functional issues that the two groups are concerned about, but the primary driver, I guess if you want to say the contrast or difference between the two, is that the library board is seeking a design that is fairly contemporary in nature in its style and patterning, and the HSPB believes that more of a traditional or historic design to the landscape in that courtyard would be more in keeping and be more harmonious with the architecture of the building. Beginning on page 6 of your staff report are some various recommendations that have come from the Kalon report, from staff, and from the HSPB subcommittee. And I'll briefly review these. In the area by the ADA ramp, which is basically on the southwest side of the existing library, the recommendation there is that the pavers in that ramp and the sidewalk be such that they match the existing pavement and pavers that are in the adjacent sidewalk. That would stop at the security gate. The second item is using a standard exterior grade security door in lieu of the custom wood slat and aluminum frame gates proposed. And that's really for a matter of simplicity, strength, and aesthetics, that when the door is open, which it will be in the normally open position, you won't be seeing the back side of it as you see on page 6 in the middle of the page. The second one, the third item is to look at the paving pattern. The current one that has been designed is a diagonal pattern done in what I will call plank type pavers. And what the HSPB felt was that a more traditional type of paving pattern perpendicular to the geometry of the building would be more appropriate. There were also some different suggestions in terms of material. On page 7, I've given some suggestions in terms of aggregate washed concrete, which was not uncommon to be found in a lot of these types of spaces during the 20s, 30s, and 40s, basically before the popularity of precast concrete pavers. Looking at the plant palette, item 4 in the middle of page 7, they were looking at reducing or eliminating the spiky plants, planting things more in clusters, including things that were bedding ground covers such as natal plum or lantana, use of ornamental grasses for visual softness. In lieu of the potted plants, establishing flowering vines directly in the ground that they felt would be have a better chance of surviving, especially the summer heat. Eliminate the landscape lighting in the front of the building to avoid tripping hazards, vandalism, and the belief was that there is really enough ambient light on the street to adequately light the building. And then number 5, to consider an alternative solution for the seating that may be more flexible, comfortable, affordable, and relates better to the architectural style of the historic building. In the packet, toward the very end of your packet, there are some suggestions for alternative seating that the HSPB subcommittee have investigated for your consideration. As in looking at this, they were looking at seating that was specifically tailored for outdoor use, that could be rearranged flexibly for accommodating the various special events, durable, washable, low maintenance, and stackable if possible. And noting in the top of page 8, some of these chairs came in as little as $30 for the type of sort of durable cafe chair that you often see in the cafes around bigger cities and in Europe. In the middle of page 8, you'll see some photos that indicate some of the type of chairs and seating that had been found in these outdoor spaces at the time that the building was constructed. The ones toward the left were some actual photos in the Wellwood Marine Courtyard. The one on the right in the middle of the page on page 8 indicates a type of wicker chair that was found commonly in the resorts and hotels here in Palm Springs in the 30s and 40s. And then lastly, a coordination of the existing precast benches that have been placed along the south edge of this courtyard. In looking at the land use permits for the ice cream shop, we did not find anything that identified approval for these chairs and tables. So our recommendation is that if there are not written approvals by the city to the adjacent landlord, our recommendation would be that those be phased out and allow the courtyard to stand just on its own with the type of furniture and seating that is part of this project. And then lastly, on the bottom of page 8 and on to page 9, is looking at a way to effectively acoustically screen, both visually and acoustically, but primarily acoustically screen these two rather large air handling units in this courtyard. Our recommendation is that they be done in a board-formed concrete that is matching of the walls of the Wellwood Library that would provide the mass and thickness that would help control and mitigate the sound, and that any openings required for air for those units to breathe and function properly, as well as maintenance, be provided on the east side of those enclosures. So again, any noise that might come out of that enclosure would be directed away from the area of use in the courtyard. That concludes my staff report. And again, what the two bodies are looking for here is for the AAC to read some of the information, look at the information that you see both in the design and in the Kalon report, and offer the two subcommittees your suggestions on what might be a balance between the contemporary design and the historic context of the library. I believe the library director, Jeannie Case, is here in the audience and can answer any questions you may have, and we remain available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions for staff. I'm going to start with, I see a couple of hands going, but John, do you have any questions for staff?
No questions at this time for staff.
Okay, Tom?
No questions.
Okay, Robert?
Yeah, I was over in the courtyard, and there is what looks like a transformer,
yes,
which does not show up on the plans. Is there a plan for that to be relocated, or?
I don't believe it's to be relocated. When we look at the enclosures that we do for the two air conditioning units, we would try to figure out a way to bring those in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Member Sean?
Yep. So are you 100% sure that the AC condenser units, you say there's 2 or 3 of them in the courtyard?
I think there's 2.
Yep. Are 100% sure they supply, or they're part of the library, not the adjacent building on Tockwitz?
I was told they were part of the library, but I have not confirmed that personally. It is. Jeannie is saying it is.
Whereabouts is the transformer? Sorry, where exactly is it?
If you look on the site plan that I have on the screen right now, you see the 2 rectangles. I don't know if I have a pointer here. Hold on a minute.
Transformer or switchgear?
So these are the transformers. I'm sorry, these are the condensing units. The transformer sits right about here.
Yep. It's electrical meter, transformer, switchgear thingy.
Yeah. I think they're transformers. It's a fairly small box. It's not nearly the size of the condensing units. I'd say maybe it's about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet.
Okay, so it's in between the building and the condenser units?
That's correct.
Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Member Tom.
Is the adjacent building using this courtyard as fire egress? It looks like there's doors from the adjacent building that open into this courtyard. Are those doors required to be there, and/or do they have an easement to use this courtyard?
My understanding is that part of the easement requirements or egress requirements out of the adjacent Plaza Las Flores does require passing through that courtyard. I don't know what the legal arrangements are for that access, but my understanding is that that's part of the consideration that from the courtyard side, these gates that are being put in for security must be able to be opened and move outward.
So, Ken, this may be a difficult question, but to what program did Volts follow to come up with this design? Was there a program that was provided to Volts?
I'm going to let Jeannie answer that question. I was not involved with the earlier design initiation of the project, but I believe that he was given the parameters of the functional requirements that are outlined in the staff report. I don't know what direction he was given in terms of aesthetics.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, can we have a couple more questions? Member John?
Is there a budget established for this?
I'm also going to turn that over to Jeannie. I believe that part of what the scope is here is to identify what this final scope will be, get it finally priced out, and then take it to the City Council for approval. But I'll let Jeannie clarify that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Member John, do you have questions?
This question is technically not within the boundaries of the site, but the signage on the adjacent buildings, is that approved signage in the windows? Is there something that, is there anything that can be put in place in looking at a cohesive package of this space relating to the adjacent buildings' windows for advertisements and such?
I have not paid attention to the adjacent building signage, but any signage that's there would have to conform either to the sign program for that facility or the city's sign ordinance. So if there's signage there that doesn't conform to that or that you're concerned about, you may want to turn it in as a notice to code enforcement.
Okay, having no questions, I'm going to open up to, do you have a presentation, or would you like to start answering our questions?
I was just going to answer your questions.
Okay, all right, very good. So name and address for the record, even though.
I am Jeannie Case. I'm the library director of the Palm Springs Public Library, and I oversee the Wellwood Murray Memorial Library. My address would be, in this instance, 300 South Sunrise Way at the library. So to answer your questions about, specifically about the budget, the Library Board of Trustees has authorized $150,000 in their budget to cover the cost of the patio and whatever design is needed. They are with the hope or expectation that the City of Palm Springs would cover the ADA portion of the project. So that would go to City Council for approval. But the Library Board of Trustees has already authorized the money for this project out of their trust funds, so it's not city funds. The question about what program did the landscape architect follow? We have met several times over the past, what seems at least 5 years. So we have gone with City Council subcommittee meetings, Library Board meetings, HSPB meetings. Different designs and ideas have come about and changed. We suggested grass, artificial turf, rolling hills, pavers. We've seen it all. So I would just be honest with you, this project has gone back and forth several times with lots of different design options. And we are at this point where we are. So it has been before City Council subcommittee at least twice that I know of for sure with different council members. So, yeah.
Okay, Jeannie, just real quick, I'm going to ask anyone in the audience to comment on this project. So seeing none, we'll ask you questions directly.
Please.
I'm going to start from Member Tom. I'm going to start with you.
growing up here, I used that library a lot, and the courtyard was always a very important space when we were in the library, first as a kids' library and then adults' library. It was soft and reflecting. Now it's so hard and unfriendly. And I think it's a real shame that that two-story building was allowed to be built right on the property line, but that's there, and we can't change that. But I think in this landscape, I would encourage if there's anything that could be done to screen that building. I know you can't put a solid hedge around the edge because we do have these egress points coming out of that building, but I think we could do segments of hedge so that when you're inside the library, your vision is basically only going to see the landscaping. It will help to make that huge building go away. I also think that the placement of these 4 fixed benches running at angles really kind of eliminates your capability to do events in there that have any sort of flexibility, that might have seated events, standing events. And I just feel that the hardness of the hardscape takes away so much from the concept of what a courtyard should be. The huge variety of different hardscapes in such a small package. So I guess I question, were those sorts of concepts discussed at all with the landscape architect when he started working on this project?
They were, and at first we suggested grass, but then there's the issue of the drought and sustainability and the facilities, our city's maintenance, accessing this area and mowing it and keeping up with it, and then it being in shade might not grow so well. So I know that was a consideration. We've talked about, there have been so many different suggestions, and we're willing to be flexible too. We want this to be the best space possible, but it's a tiny space. It is hard to clean. There are safety issues back there. There's an easement that we don't actually own most of the land back there. So putting up hedges might prove to be difficult because we don't own that land where the hedges would be. And the easement goes right up against the building almost, and then through the middle of the proposed patio. And I'm not an expert, and maybe Flynn knows a little bit more about easements and things. And the benches, we're flexible about the benches. One thing that I would counter about stackable furniture is that those are concerns for us. Stackable furniture, it will walk away. And then we don't have the staffing to bring it in, or cleaning's a maintenance issue. Stacking, it's a concern for us. Sure, we want the place to have a nice, welcome and friendly, comfortable place. Not too comfortable, but we don't want it to become a napping spot either. But there are so many different pros and cons for all the furniture, like you see in the screen. I don't know. I feel like I missed something else that you mentioned.
That's fine. Another question: are there public restrooms in the library that people using this courtyard will have access to?
The public restroom is in the building next door in
the new
Plaza
the
Los
Plaza
Flores.
Flores?
Yes, and we have a key to those restrooms because our restrooms are not ADA accessible. Our restroom, there's one single, and so then the downtown restroom program, and then the Plaza Los Flores is actually the designated restroom.
Anybody using Plaza Los Flores has access to this. Does Plaza Los Flores have any requirements for maintenance or upkeep of this area, since it's something that their building is using?
I can't answer that for sure.
I can tell you that within the development standards and the conditions of the land use permit for Ben & Jerry's, which is the ice cream shop, they're responsible for maintaining the area immediately adjacent to their tenant space. Their land use permit does not include seating and tables in this courtyard.
And I do know that our facilities, they come back there and power wash weekly. And our facilities director mentioned that if we should avoid textured pavers or textured anything because the pressure washing might wash it away. And that was a concern for her. And there are a couple of other concerns. But
No more questions for me now.
Okay, Member Kenny.
Hi, Jeannie. Thanks
Hi.
for joining us today. This might seem like a really obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How would you envision really using this space? Because it's been there for a long time, and maybe it hasn't been in a form that is conducive to how you wanted to use it or could have used it. So I'm finding myself wondering, what are we really going to do with this space, and shouldn't we design it for that purpose?
Mm-hmm. And I believe Ken did copy my suggestions for use in the staff report. So where was it?
On page 2.
Thank you. Oh, that's quick. Page 2. So for us right now, the way it is designed as is, it's got gravel in the back patio. We would love to use this space as a reception area. We do exhibits from time to time in Wellwood. We do lectures. We rent the meeting room in Wellwood, and so I think that this space has an opportunity to become a great, like a reception, an outdoor reception spot for the library and for people renting the space. It could be, and as I said in there, it could be story time at the Wellwood. We don't do any children's programs. Kids, it's hard to get kids to sit in gravel. Mm-hmm. I don't mean to be silly, but we have done in the past, used to do story time on the Village Green, and that was very successful. And so that's an idea. You know, they've got a Walk of Stars event happening next month, I think, and it would make the perfect spot to adjourn their Walk of Stars reception back to the Wellwood patio and have a nice little reception with the inductee. And so I see it as a great opportunity for our own events and for potential fundraiser for the city to do rentals in there.
So if it needed to maintain flexibility to do both seated and perhaps standing receptions, to me does it make sense to do any kind of benches or anything that can't be moved out of the way? It almost seems like it's going to have movable parts, movable furniture.
I'm not super worried about the benches. I don't know if we need 4 or maybe just 2. I'm uncommitted to either of that, but I think that we could always work around benches that were there for events where we might do a reception or a classical concert or something like that. If we needed more chairs, we would definitely do a rental where we bring chairs in and set those up or have them set up for us. But I think I'm not too concerned about the placement of benches and working around those. People always will want a place to sit, so I think it could work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. My last question is, and this might just be asking for your opinion, and no opinion is ever wrong. Are you in concurrence with the staff's recommendation on what they are recommending that we approve, or do you feel that there are some changes that need to be made for the way you envision using the space?
I have a couple of concerns. In some instances, I agree completely, and I talked to the facilities director just before coming to this meeting. She mentioned about the landscaping. She recommended that we stay away from lantana because it hibernates during our high season, and I love lantana. I think it's beautiful, and but I didn't realize that it hibernates. So I'm very, in my opinion, I'm very open, and I think my library board is too. We're very open to the actual plants and what is chosen. I understand about spiky plants. We don't want people to get injured, and so I think we're in agreement with that. I would like to have landscape lighting or lighting on the building, and I know as speaking for my library board, members, I know that they want lighting on the building because we want to highlight this building. It's our landmark. It's the first city building, I believe, and we want it to look beautiful and be a showpiece in downtown. And so I think that would be, I would recommend that we keep the lighting or landscape lighting. Another comment from the facilities director was that metal gates get really hot in the summer when they face west, and so she's just wanted to put that out there, and also said that mesh is better than speakeasy grills. I'm not a designer, so I'm going to leave that up to the designers to figure out the gate. I know that the gate needs to be it needs to be able to crash out at night if someone's coming out of Plaza Los Foros. It needs to be able so that people can't climb on it. It also needs to be so that people can't break in somehow or reach through and open it. Again, I'm leaving that up to the designers. We don't want it to be a ladder. We did have a design, it was really cute, but then I look at it and I'm like, that's a ladder, and so that won't work. Our furniture would need some sort of anti-graffiti coating. That wasn't even mentioned, so that's not up for discussion, I suppose. And if we did do benches, they would need a pad under them and not pavers because per the facilities director, people would just pick up the pavers with the furniture and take it out. So the furniture, portable furniture, makes me nervous because I don't have the staffing to deal with it. It moves off and goes away, and we might lose our furniture. I don't know that the cost on the furniture is a big concern. Of course, we want to be reasonable with our budget, but we also want something that's going to be durable and hopefully you're able to sit on it in the summertime too, because I think metal is going to be really hot. But the pavers, in my opinion, I know the building is built on a diagonal, so I can visualize the diagonal pattern being okay. I'm indifferent to whether it's on the perpendicular or diagonal. I think it should just, you should note that the pavers in the front of Wellwood are not originals. So don't think that the terracotta was originally there, because I don't believe it was. And my library board members are telling me that that was done when they put in Walk of Stars. So I think that is all of my long opinion. We're just ready to use this space.
Yeah, sounds like it.
It's been
We'll
a
see
few
what we can
years.
do to help. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Member Sean, questions for the applicant? Okay, Member Robert?
Hi. Couple questions. During all the iterations in the subcommittees, was there ever any discussion about relocating the condensers?
Yes, and it is cost prohibitive. There was a discussion for us to work with Grit to build a little platform over their dumpster area and try to move them up there, and it's too much.
Okay.
That would eat up our entire budget, I think, right there. And the original design when they renovated Wellwood was to try to get them on the roof, but I think they're too heavy, and the building just, I don't know. I know they decided not to put them on the roof. That was the original hope, was that they would be up on the roof of Wellwood itself. But
right.
Yeah, they ended up out in the yard.
And even just keeping them in the courtyard, but moving them closer to the building? I mean, it wouldn't be very far, but...
It would cost so much money.
It would, okay. The other question is what's the primary access to the space? Is it through the library, or is it going to be from the street?
I think it's both. Our ADA access to the building is through the patio.
Okay.
And so the original force to get this done is to make this ADA compliant. And the ramp by Ben and Jerry's is not ADA compliant. And so that whole area needs to be regraded. And that's where this whole project started, was to match the grade, match the pavers, finish the whole thing, deal with gravel. Gravel is not a great, our facilities is having issues with the gravel. There's a lot of stuff that they have to clean out of the gravel that they don't want to deal with. I mean, not that they don't want to deal with it, you know what I mean?
And from the building to the patio, is it accessed primarily from one of the wings, or is it from the center diagonal?
It's from the no, it's just to the east of the center diagonal. There's an exit, a back door.
Okay.
And do you have that on there? So.
That show?
Yeah, I can't see that far, but you see where that center diagonal is. There's the first dot. It's where the pavers go. Right there. That's where the door is.
Yeah,
okay.
This is where the accessible door is.
So this plan proposes a planting area in front of the diagonal portion. That's going to your left.
This is planting, and this is
okay.
Yes, and there are existing trees.
Okay.
In those areas, so there would be plantings around the existing trees and keeping the trees.
Okay, thank you.
Member Tom, questions?
Thank you. You know, this is a tough one. I know this project's been around for a long time, and different people have looked at it over the years and trying to figure out the best use. It seems that the design right now is kind of a historic building set in a contemporary setting with the way the pavers are laid out. And I think, you know, if that contemporary paver, you know, carried out, you know, across the sidewalks and into the street, but right now it's kind of separated from, you know, what's happening across the street. And when I look at the space, you know, I think, well, okay, you have the functional aspects of it that you need for the library and to make it like a reception area. And does it want to become similar to what's across the street, or does it become this kind of tranquil garden courtyard that you might stumble upon, you know, like something you might see in Santa Barbara or Carmel, or just this kind of more of a historical feeling to it, even though there's nothing historic left, but it could be created where people would come upon it and say, oh, wow, here's a little gem, a little oasis in the middle of this that's more befitting of the building itself. One of the questions I had was, one of the priorities to keep the existing trees in terms of the design program, or some of the big existing trees, or to keep all the existing trees?
The trees that are shown are existing trees to remain.
To remain, okay.
The Kalon report was suggesting there be a large central tree placed, and that the existing trees be removed. And from a cost perspective, the library was preferring not to move in that direction.
Right. And I think when I look at the design, the existing trees kind of have dictated where the actual landscape areas are proposed. So was my question, if those were paramount, or the idea of moving something further away from the building that becomes a focal point and a gathering space. So I think that answers all my questions. Thank you.
Hey, Member John.
The
microphone.
The HSPB discussions between the library and that group, I guess they came after the fact. Is that correct? After this plan was
yes.
brought up.
Yes. We have. Yeah. I'm just trying to think. We've met with, HSPB has met a couple of times on this over the years, but we did have a meeting in June, as it was stated here, and we came to a consensus on several things, but then there were issues that we that the two groups could not agree on, so we suggested that we bring it to you for advice.
And with the paving materials, it's a very tight budget. The staff has suggested some other options. How do you feel about the other options that the staff has proposed, other than, I heard you say, maintenance-wise, they don't want gaps, they don't want things that will be affected by pressure washing.
Well, the texture of the stones, that was what our facilities director mentioned, was that if you pressure wash it, it might take off the texture. And for me, what was it? I want to make sure that it's not slippery. We had a comment from a community member who uses this building and goes in the ADA access, and they just said, please don't make it slippery. So whatever that means, as far as we don't want it too smooth so that if it gets wet or leaves fall on it, that it becomes slick and hazardous. I'm open to the ideas. I'm open to suggestions on the pavers or poured concrete. I don't have a professional opinion on what's more durable maintenance-wise or easier to repair, or I don't have an opinion for sure. So I'm open to ideas.
Well, I'm excited to see this project coming forward and that something will happen. I know over the years there's been a lot of community comments, and this will be noticed. People will definitely have opinions, and so I'm excited to hear what my fellow members here have to say. Thank you.
So, Jeannie, let me ask you a couple of questions about the function of the courtyard. So I really liked, the feedback that you gave about, story time for children. So in my mind, I envision something like you're sitting underneath a tree, the tree may be having a planter, the person who reads the book, and then the kids are sitting on sort of like lower scale chairs, and then maybe something like a group of 6 to 8 kids, listening to somebody read the book and maybe be alive like that. And then at the same time, you also have functions where you have like social events where people will having cocktails and they'll be around this place. But when I read your program and I try to picture those events in this courtyard, there's nothing that gives you a sort of protected place to stand on. So for example, if Ken will be giving a lecture on conservation and history of Palm Springs, where would he have his back to, and where would his audience be sitting to listen to him? And then while he's doing that, if there's people going inside and outside of the Paseo building, will they go through the people who are sitting, or will they go around him? The program is nice, but the space, did you feel like the space was providing you the flexibility to do those things?
Well, I know the space is small, so it is an issue, and I think that the groups who would be in there, it would be an intimate group. I don't see 100 people back here. I don't know how that, it might, I don't know. But I think, let's say someone's giving a lecture, in my mind, I kind of, and I don't know how those air conditioners are, because I bet they're loud. I was envisioning that as the backdrop for the speaker or person performing, and they would have that wall behind them and then speak out into the patio area. I know that there's not a lot of traffic that goes through to Plaza Las Flores, because I think their main entrance for their restaurants and things are on the other side. So I think that we just work within the space that we have and try to make it work. And so I hear exactly what you're asking. I get it, and it is a small space in reality. When you walk out, I know some of you said that you've been over there and recently, and it's a pretty small space. And so I don't know that we would have a lot of large events there, but I think we need the opportunity to use it And I think that having some sort of hard surface for us to walk and sit on or place chairs or do things, I think that that's important rather than having DG or dirt out there. And I think grass would be fun, but I know that my facilities department doesn't want grass, and sustainability probably doesn't want grass either.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Oh, Member Sean.
Couple. I'm having trouble and it's a question for both of you. To the south of the main diagonal, I see another door also facing east in the rear courtyard. As I try to walk myself through the circulation plan here, is that door used very often? Because what's shown on the plan is that it opens up directly into a planter and then also blocked by a bench that's being proposed east of it. So it would be on the south wing, east side.
Nope.
Here? No,
Past
no.
it, past it.
Yeah, on the
The
library building.
Right there, right, one above.
Just up from there.
Yeah.
That is the Historical Society's emergency exit door. It's not a public entrance.
And is that swing shown accurately, which you can't read up there, because I can't either.
But you're right, it swings towards the planter.
Yep. So it's hinged on the south.
I think it's isn't it two doors that swing open? Or is it just one door that swings open?
You can see that door on the top of page 3. And I think it's a single door with 2 side lights, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
That image also on the top of page 3, whomever was asking about the transformer on the picture on the right, you can see the transformer there behind the 2 trees.
The transformer's up against the building almost.
And then quick question for either yourself or Ken. I see on the landscape plan, it just says existing tree protect in place. I'm having a really difficult time even seeing where they occur on the plans, but I can kind of make it out going back and forth. What are those tree types? I don't see that listed either.
I think they're Tipuano trees,
Okay.
large Tipuanos.
You can see them in the pictures on page 3.
Yeah.
But they're Tipuanas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. At this time, we'll deliberate here. Okay, so I'm going to try to put some context in the issues of this is a real tough challenge to meet. You have the facilities who just wants to cleanly wash it every day and not have to deal with anything else. Second, you have the library, which would like to have some outdoor functions. Third, you have the public of any kinds and shapes and types. And fourth, we have the historical part. And not all 4 of them are going to win. So I think what is important and what do we want to create with the space is the feedback that the planning department, as well as the staff, HSPB would require of us. I would set the tone by saying, I understand about sustainability, I believe about sustainability, but there's places for grass and there's places for trees. And it cannot be because of how we service or how we clean it, that's the determining factor of when we cannot have it. So having said that, can I hear some of your thoughts on this project? And go from there. So I'd like to start with right from the end, Member John.
Thank you. When the library was redone, I was involved with 1PS, and I know there was a lot of public opinion about the space. The uses are very complex. There's a lot going on, as we've all said and noted. With the existing drawing that that was submitted, being in the space, I don't find that one wall that it is playing off of, the angled pattern, to be a true focal point of the space and so important as to dictate the ground plane. So I'm not big on the angled portion of it. The putting in grass in this area will be very difficult because of the shade. Primary use is during season is cool weather. That makes it difficult growing period also. Getting people into the space, making it really viable and keeping it alive is very important, in that I saw homeless people and others hanging out there on a regular basis. So I would love to see the program include the children. I would love to see the events actually happening. So the fixed benches that were mentioned, I'm not settled on those. Now that we have a program for the larger park in the area, perhaps a nod to some of the design pieces in that could be looked at in terms of site furniture or ground plane colors. So I would say rethink some of what's been presented.
I'm sorry, I missed the last comment that you said.
Rethink, I would rethink the existing, what has been presented into a...
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Member Tom?
Yeah, this is a tough one because you do have access. I think I just have one question for staff. The seating that is outside the Ben & Jerry's, is there a limit to that, or did that kind of grew over time as a seating area, or was that part of their original program?
It appears to be something that has crept in over time. I did go back and look at the land use permit for the approval of that ice cream shop, and it does not include any exterior seating. It's interior seating only. So I suspect it's something that maybe that tenant worked with the landlord to bring in, but it's not part of their approved land use permit.
Okay, thank you. I think it could be a really simple solution. I think that the budget that they have, a lot could be done with that budget. I would like the idea of some type of focal point for the courtyard, the idea of moving, you know, maybe those trees need to go and a new specimen tree is brought in and that becomes the anchoring point. I think there could be a diagram put together that would kind of start to delineate how, you know, you have a circulation pattern of access to the existing buildings. You want to provide some patio seating for the Ben & Jerry's, but some of those spaces, while providing that access and those patio areas, could be separated by landscaping from what could be kind of a central courtyard that's more related to the library itself. And that could be done through, you know, low, even if the planters are only 24 inches wide, you know, at ground level with a boxwood hedge or something, so visually you can see through it, but it softens the buildings. Some areas it could get taller. There could be some, the green screens used if you have a narrow space to create, you know, living walls to just kind of create some interest. But I think it's a real simple solution, and the access would come off of that main door or even both doors that kind of tells you how it wants to come together. So, and I you know, in the photos that were presented in the report, I know there might be some controversy, but I think the one on the left, there's just some simplicity to that, and it conveys a feeling that I think could happen. It would be on page 7, the left photo. And even if the loose pea gravel wasn't between those pavers, that photo to me evokes kind of a feeling I think that courtyard could instill or represent.
I think I'm going to take the opportunity to mention that. So, Tom, the landscape is concentrated so close to the building edge that it makes the actual accessible spaces for furniture or to actually be away towards the other building, not towards the library. It's almost like it's carving away space that is really limited already. So it's pushing the whole space away from the library rather than creating a zone for the library and then let the other space be used for circulation. And so it seems like it's in the wrong place for the concentration of landscape that is being proposed.
And there could be some type of, narrow living wall or something that would screen those AC units and still allow ventilation, but it would be a vertical green space. But, you could diagram it out almost and then start to place landscape in, and it's going to come together. But I think kind of I imagine more than a contemporary courtyard. And I get it, you could go either way with it, but maybe something a little bit more that could evoke more of a historic or old world sense to it.
Thank you, Tom. Member Robert.
I'll start with the big stuff. I agree with Member Tom about creating a focal point, and I think it's I think it really needs a specimen tree somewhere in this center-ish of the courtyard. And my idea I have is that maybe if you do a solid screen around the AC units, that maybe you do a round planter with a bench around it, bench height, similar to what's done with the specimen tree in front of Tommy Bahama's, and that it engages into the screen around the AC unit in some way. So that will help mitigate the mass of these air conditioning units. And I like the idea of creating some sort of greenery that grows up on that wall, again, to try and reduce its impact on the courtyard, because it's a very small space, and those are huge elements. It's a huge element in the space. I agree also that for a matter of cost and look, I think that the concrete option on page 7 on the left side would work quite nicely. At the right scale, I think it could actually be a very nice, create a nice atmosphere. Going through staff recommendations, I would agree with number 1. On number 2, which is the steel security door, I would like to see something that would had a more historic look, wasn't quite so contemporary, because when it's closed, it'll be attached to the library, so it has some sort of reference tie-in to the building. We talked about paving, and again, I think if we, on number 4, skipping to number 4, which is, well, I agree with most of the recommendations. The spiky cacti should be eliminated. I don't know, I can't recommend any specific plants, but I would say that it definitely should have a specimen tree. And the seating, I think if you do incorporate seating around a planter, that would probably be adequate to providing seating, fixed seating in the courtyard. The staggering and random placement of the benches, I think, really are more, create more of an impediment, especially if they're fixed. And if you just do something that's simple and has a reference to the original courtyard design, which had this round planter with a specimen tree in it, I think that would actually solve the bench situation. And what's number 6? I would agree with number 6, which is removing the tables and benches. And then the AC units I spoke about before. We haven't really talked about the landscape lighting. I think actually landscape lighting for an evening time event is a really nice thing. Maybe there are better ways to do it or better fixtures to use than what's being proposed. And I wouldn't be married to the existing trees either, personally. I don't think they really add a lot, and they really take away some very valuable space within the courtyard. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Sean.
Yep. So I agree with a lot of what our colleagues are saying up here, particularly with maybe the need for re-examining or simplifying the paving in the rear as central. Going back to some of the more historical conclusions prepared in the draft, particularly a specimen tree, and I wouldn't, the incorporation of that into a planter that can serve two purposes, act as a planter, act as seating, maybe three purposes, act as an enclosure for the air conditioning units sounds really wise to me. Maybe looking at some more of or a specimen tree or two in the rear courtyard might be better served rather than what's there now. Some of the proposed planting now, also when I look at the planting palette and the sizes, the Calancho, the felt plant, I'm fairly familiar with. I know there's two versions that I'm aware of with that plant. This one's pretty furry. There's an alternate that's called the naked version, and that can be a bit more rubbery and seems to go with some of the other proposed plants. The way I know that plant is it can really be the star of a show here also. So I question the size that's being proposed as a 15-gallon, where I would think that I'd like to see more of them. And I think instead of size being called out by the caliper of the container, to me it should be the height of the particular plant and really make that more of a star or a grouping if that ends up being in the final cut for a revised simplified plant palette. Some of the other things, and what I was reading in some of the historical report and recommendations here, we're recommending a more simplified palette, which I also agree with in that courtyard. And some of these things just look a little too pedestrian, like the firecracker. I'm not quite sure about the Geminiflora and how well that's going to do in that rear shady courtyard either. So I think maybe a simplification of some of the palette back there might be helpful also. With the benches, and I wonder if we can pull that slide back up. Sorry, well, that's a good example there also. Maybe perhaps a more historical bench. So, you know, the more I read the recommendations in this historical review here by Kalon, I feel like I just want to repeat everything that he's saying there. And so that would go along with the benches, the orientation of the benches, the style of them. This mechanical room door we're looking at seems inappropriate for the building. It feels like maybe we're going to do another study on this landscape plan, and I wonder if in order to streamline this, because I get a sense that this has been going on forever, and we're just going to make it go on even longer here. I wonder if this wouldn't be a subcommittee that we could work with and maybe help streamline, work with the landscape architect firm here and maybe help streamline the approval process of this, incorporating some of these recommendations.
So
that might, yeah, go ahead.
So these are recommendations to HSPB and the planning staff, as far as because of this sort of lack of agreement that they have from the historical recommendations, as well as the city coming up with what they have for improvements and the fact that they want to finish this. So we could have it as a volunteer to committee to help re-guide this design, but it's not necessarily a project in which it goes through the normal process of AAC, correct?
Right. I think that it's, with the information that everyone is commenting, I'm hearing consistency in it. And I think that the landscape architect can come up with a simplified palette based on your comments and those of the Kalon report. If somebody would like to participate in that, we certainly would welcome you, but I don't think it's essential. I think we recognize that we have one more step to do here, and I don't think that that's going to be a difficult step. I think it's one final wrap-up of the comments that you've made, as well as the ones we've seen from these other reports, and I think we'll have one more pass that the library board and the HSPB will take a look at. I think we're close.
I'm glad you feel confident. Yeah, I think we're concerned about how long it has been taking. That's why, you know, Sean is proposing this committee to help guide it and get to the answer much quicker than going back and forth.
Yeah, by maybe a little heavier work up front on our part or a subcommittee's part, but hopefully abbreviating the process after. A couple of the other things I'd like to, along the same lines of the benches, when you go to the plan of where the courtyard and the pavers are proposed, my first office was in that building to the east of this particular building, and so I'm pretty familiar with this courtyard. And those exit doors that come out of the west side of the east building, if people were to come out of there, they're just going to hit that really long bench that's proposed in the dead center of that project. So to me, it didn't feel like someone really experienced this space very well with that particular layout of benches and their ultimate use and circulation around there. I also have another question, though, and this might be for you, Ken. It'd be interesting to see the property lines delineated on this plan also, because I'm curious about easements and how that would work and what exactly we're proposing to put pavers on that we're actually not allowed to put pavers on.
Actually, in your packet is a drawing that is the ADA ramp.
Okay.
And
A10.
I'm going to step up to the screen here a minute, but the city does own the land. It is an easement. And the property line runs literally right along here.
The north.
These are the existing columns that are on Plaza Las Flores, and that property line literally runs just in front of them, right through there. So the access is an easement, but we own the property, the city owns the property up to this point.
And so but if you stay up there, Ken, that little section down to the southwest corner, yes, that's kind of not the property.
This is part of the Plaza Las Flores parcel.
It is.
Yeah, that property line continues out.
And
in fact, when you look in the ADA drawing, this concrete bench that helps resolve the cross slope actually straddles the property line.
So then that south of that is not the property.
This is not part of our property. This is part of Plaza Las Flores.
Okay, but here it's incorporated into the new paver plan, but we would actually not be touching it.
Well, I think that the designer has taken a little bit of liberty with what he's put here.
I see.
Because I don't think we have.
Well, it says here that remove and replace pavers as necessary to construct curb.
That's the curb for this right here. There's a cross slope issue as well as a slope this way, and so this concrete goes in and it slightly straddles the property line to resolve the cross slope. But to the best of my knowledge, and I'll confirm this with Gina, but I don't believe we have design rights to this part here.
So the angle layout doesn't even make gesture to Indian Canyon.
No.
Thank you.
Hey, Member Kenny.
Okay. So I'm generally in concurrence with most of the comments made by my colleagues here previously. I'll just put a little bit of emphasis on a couple of perhaps slight adjustments. I really like the idea of restoring the central courtyard tree, some sort of specimen tree. My suggestion would be something that the canopy can be trimmed up high enough so that It doesn't create too much of a visual block if you tried to do some sort of an event in there and people can't see around the tree. I would also suggest that we don't do any kind of a permanent planter or benching around it, but take benches of whatever style are ultimately chosen. I really like the modern ones that the city is suggesting, the staff is suggesting, but if they went with something that was too heavy to pick up and steal, but two people of able body could pick them up and then remove. Let me back up one step. Maybe their resting place is in a triangular or square shape or something around the tree facing out so people can sit under the tree. But then if they want to rearrange them for story time, they can set up a little theater style setting somewhere using the tree as a backdrop or staging area or not. So that was how I visualized it, giving it some flexibility in how it's used. And I think that would also help soften the courtyard with that tree so that it's kind of inviting for people to come up and sit down, maybe coming out of ice cream or just wandering out of the library.
And I think anecdotally, if the chairs are flexible, but they're not too precious, they don't tend to walk. If they're just heavy enough and they're not quite designerly enough.
Right.
We had benches of the nature that you saw in the image with many of those different benches when I was at the University of Chicago, which is on the south side of Chicago, and those benches sat out and they did not go away. They stayed there.
Yeah, if it's just too
So
heavy.
I think if you pick a movable chair or seat, like the cafe seats that, you know, everybody doesn't want one in their backyard, I think you'll be successful in them not walking away.
Right, and that way they can be rearranged by
Right.
a couple of people who can lift heavy objects.
Yes.
As needed. I personally, I think DG is a solution other than pavers, rather than pavers, that will help soften that whole courtyard. And I think it's agreeing with the Kalon report. It's more period correct than a lot of pavers that might be chosen. And it sounds like the style and the pattern and the angle of the pavers is one of those things that everybody's going round and round on. But nobody seems to disagree that DG would be a good solution. So that's going to be my suggestion. Is it'll solve a lot of problems and still look nice and soften the hardscape that is that fishbowl of hardscape back there. I think that covers. Yeah, I'm good.
Tom.
As I'm looking at the plans, it doesn't show any new work around the air conditioning equipment. It doesn't show planting, it doesn't show fencing. So Ken, just a question for you. Your recommendation under number 7, where you suggest somebody suggests a concrete wall poured in place, is that just an idea you had, or is that something the applicants have proposed?
No, that was an idea that I had. To date, my understanding, and Jeannie, please correct me, the designer hasn't really come up with a solution that is both cost-effective and acoustically effective within the realm of the design that they've had so far. Currently, I believe there's a chain link fence around those units, which of course does nothing. So the thought that I had, and I'm looking at it from an acoustical point of view, that requires solid mass. I'm looking at it from a durability point of view, that led to something that's felt like concrete. The building has board-formed concrete walls. That seemed like a natural tie-in in terms of a material and a finish. And the idea of allowing some type of a vine or other material to soften it, I think is completely appropriate.
Well, I think everything you said makes perfect sense, and I think it would be nice to actually see that on the plan. The other thing I would recommend is on the inboard face of that concrete wall, there should be sound attenuation panels.
Yes.
Because that noise will just start to bounce back and forth in there. The other thing that I see on the very last drawing in our package that I don't see in any of the landscape plans is they're showing a concrete bench along the side of the walkway coming off of Palm Canyon Drive to get into here. And that bench is right on the property line, and it separates Ben and Jerry's courtyard from the access to here. Is that bench part of this project? Because it's not shown on the landscape plans.
Yes, it is. And the bench is there really more as a wall, but it's a wall that is wide enough that one could sit on, and it resolves the issue of the cross-slope problems with the ADA ramp.
So as we come up that side pedestrian walkway and we reach the gate, it looks to me like you're going into your cell at San Quentin. That gate is just very unattractive. And somebody made the comment of a gate that spoke more to a historical character, I think would be much more appropriate. I totally understand that it has to be, you know, that there's no access and climb over it. But I think one of the odd problems that this courtyard will have is that the Plaza Flores does have access to it 24 hours. There's a bar there that operates until 2 in the morning, and their patrons come in and use that restroom, and they can go walking out right into that courtyard. And I don't know that you're ever going to be able to change that. So unfortunately, it just throws another design issue on top of this. But going back to the actual design proposal, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the pavement with that huge variety of pieces is just way too busy for such a small courtyard, and it takes it away from the historical aspect of what this building should be. The concept of the large central tree makes perfect sense to me. I would almost suggest that if it had a fixed wall around it, that in itself will lift the tree 1.5 to 2 feet to get it even higher for the canopy to be above view levels. And I think just simplifying the plant material and keeping it a very calm, quiet place is the goal it needs to go. And I totally think the fixed benches just throw a cog in the works.
Okay, so this was an unfinished business item. We should have just sent it to the back. I apologize for the rest of the.
These comments were very, very helpful.
Yeah, good. You have how many professionals for how long? I think you have plenty. I think I would like to emphasize on Tom's dossier of do a circulation plan, figure out where people are coming in and out so you know what space are left to do your program. And see how much that landscape area impedes into that area. And if you can't, reduce it so that then you have more room to do your programs. But I think we gave you plenty of recommendations. Would you like for us to list it? Say no.
No, I have it pretty well summarized. You guys have been very consistent and clear, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, very good. All right, so can we move to new items? Oh, would you like to say 2 names to be offered, to be available if additional consultation were to happen? See a volunteer from all the way, Tom Dorsey?
I would be happy to volunteer.
And Sean, would you like to? Sure. Okay.
So
Yeah.
Sean and Tom?
And Tom Dorsey.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're going to move to New Business Jewish Community Center. Staff report, please.
Madam Chair and Architectural Committee members, this is a request to modify the landscaping at the Temple Isaiah, also known as Jewish Community Center of Palm Springs. There currently is a code enforcement case open with the site, as some plantings have died, as a lot of the grass has also died. The photo that you see here on the screen is actually an old one from 2015 or so. So it does show that much of the site does currently have turf along the south and westerly sides of the building, as well as through some of the parking lot areas. It looks like they have done some converting of the turf within the past few years along, looks like the southwest corner of the building. But what they have brought before you today is a new landscape proposal for the whole site, which incorporates many of the existing trees throughout the site. particularly the palm trees in the parking areas and some of the existing ficus trees or bushes along the northerly edge of the site. And they are proposing new shade trees within the parking lot. They are proposing 15 Palo Verde trees, 24-inch box size in various locations in the parking lot landscape areas. They're also proposing some ground cover within those parking lots, or within the parking lot too. So that consists of the red yuccas, elephant food, and feathery senna plants, as well as some trailing indigo plants. There will be some Texas Ranger shrubs along the northerly edge of the site between the existing ficus trees. And the greatest variety of planting is proposed along the westerly and southerly sides of the building. You see on page 3 of your staff report the list of plants that are proposed in primarily 5 and 15-gallon sizes. These plants are shown in the exhibit that was attached to your report. So they do include a variety of colors, heights, and different sizes as they grow. The applicant has also provided the irrigation plan for your consideration too. So staff reviewed these items against the turf removal technical assistance guidelines and found in general that the proposal does comply with your recommendations as a part of those guidelines. There is compliance with the water efficient landscape ordinance found in chapter 8.60 of the municipal code. They are proposing plantings that are consistent with, or that are found within the Coachella Valley Lush and Efficient, Coachella Valley Water District's Lush and Efficient Handbook. The one plant that is, or the one tree I should say that is not consistent with that plan is the elephant tree. And so the applicant is proposing 6 of those species along the south side of the building. Staff reviewed the proposal against the architectural review guidelines and generally found the project to be consistent. The one recommendation that we do have based on our review of those findings is the installation of additional planting along the westerly edge of the site on Vine Avenue. There's a small landscape area between the perimeter wall on the westerly end of the site and the sidewalk that it looks like previously had planting, perhaps some bougainvillea, and did soften the edge of the property along the westerly side of the site. So I'll conclude there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is also here to give you additional information on the design. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Questions for staff? Yes, Member Robert.
Hi, David. Quick question. In your recommendation, you talked about the landscape area on the west side of the wall. Where is the property line? Is it, because it doesn't show up on their landscape plan, you know, so I'm just curious where the property line is.
On Vine Street, Vine Avenue?
On Vine.
Yeah, I'm not certain entirely where the property line is relative to the sidewalk. I'd imagine it's behind the sidewalk, but I'm not certain on that. But in all cases, a property owner is responsible for landscape between the property line and the sidewalk or curb if there is no sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
Member Tom, go ahead.
David, I had a question. Are the existing raised planters, any renovation to those as part of this, or is this just for the ground plane where the turf areas are?
This is only for the ground plane. The raised planters on the, looks like the south and east sides of the building will remain as they are.
Thank you.
Okay, is the applicant present? Name and address.
My name is Larry Fechter. I'm the Vice President of the Temple, which is located at 233 West Alejo Road. My personal residence is 1175 East Cactus Road in Palm Springs. In addition to being the Vice President, I was charged by the Temple with working on the redevelopment of the landscape project because I'm a master gardener and have done propagation in the propagation area at the Living Desert. We did get a code violation. Unfortunately, there was an unhappy decision made at the height of the drought, which was to develop desert landscaping consequent to turning off all of the irrigation outside. Obviously, what happened was that we lost a number of ficus trees, and the balance of our landscaping really looked pretty rotten. We responded to the code violation by removing all the dead trees, by trimming up all of the remaining trees, and then we hired Paul Ortega to develop a plan that would provide us with a attractive and sustainable landscaping plan. In answer to one of the questions that just came up, we are also redeveloping the raised planters on the south side of the building. This is not part of the plan. It's something that's ongoing that we've already begun as a congregation. As was mentioned, all of the plants are found in the Lush and Efficient handbook, with the exception of the elephant tree, also known as the Bursera microphylla. The Bursera microphylla do have a natural range into Riverside County. They are native to extreme southern California and into western Mexico. They are succulent trees. They are very water efficient. There is an enormous specimen Bursera at Clark Morton's Botanic Gardens, which is enormous in size and obviously requires very little in the way of watering. The Bursera is remarkable also because it's related to frankincense, and so it has a very intense and spectacular smell. And I've brought cuttings of a Bursera microphylla in case you want to experience the smell of this plant. What else can I tell you? We've cleaned up the area along Cahuilla Avenue, which is the northern extent of our land. We've done the cleanup in the parking lot area as well. We did submit a successful application to the Desert Water Agency under their turf buyback program, and so we're very eager to move ahead so that we can utilize the funds that we will be receiving from that program in redeveloping Phase 1, which is the south area along Alejo Drive and the western wall of the Temple building itself, which is really to the east of the parking lot. Mr. Ortega is also here, and we can both answer questions that you might have.
Thank you, Larry. I don't think anybody in the audience to talk about this project. If not, we will start with our questions. I'm going to start from the middle. Member Sean, questions for the applicant.
The elephant tree, so we just purchased a really small one of these. It's the Phageroides version a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Super tiny, bonsai-ish, pretty old, but super tiny. So what's the growth expectancy on this particular version?
Yeah, the microphylla gets much larger than the Phageroides.
Okay.
I've been propagating Bursera at Living Desert. This one will get quite sizable. I would say they are not readily available commercially.
Where are you getting them from?
The Living Desert has a large collection, and they requested that I propagate and replace all of the trees in their collection. In the course of doing that, I generated far more microphylla than they have any need for, and so they're prepared to give us the 6 microphylla to plant at the temple.
And so is this what we're looking at here?
No, what you're looking at there is my neighbor's.
Olive?
No, that's a microphylla. That's a Bursera microphylla.
Okay.
If that's a photo that I sent to staff, yeah. And that tree, I don't know how large it was when it was planted 3 years ago, but you can see it's really quite sizable already.
Yeah.
It's probably on the order of 8 feet tall, I would say. These trees will certainly get above 20 feet in size. And compared to the Phageroides, they also have a larger canopy.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Member Robert.
No questions.
Hey, Member Tom.
No questions.
Hey, Member John.
No questions.
Hey, Member Kenny. Questions?
In the areas that are exposed without ground cover, will all of it be this chamois beige ground cover stone? Which looks very gray in the photograph.
Yeah, right. Yes, that is the plan. Apparently, according to the Desert Water Agency's turf buyback program, they are prepared to include essentially dead turf, which is what we have in some abundance.
Thank you.
See, we might need Paul on this question. Hi, Paul. So on the west, around the building on the west side, where you have the Indian figs, as well as the desert spoon, you have the desert spoon at 5 gallons, and then you have the Indian fig at 15 gallon. Why the choice to bring down the scale of the landscaping material?
Well, the Indian fig can get quite large, and that's a really large white blank space that these will be planted in front of the building.
Okay.
The desert spoon can grow. It has a moderate to what I would consider to be a moderate growth rate. So I didn't feel like we needed to go with a 15-gallon size. If I understand where you're going, the 15-gallon size in the desert spoon, mostly because I'm trying to minimize the expense of the plant material for the client.
Yeah. No, I think what I was trying to read in this new concept is that we have this sort of big trees, not big, but we have these trees coming along the parking, and then when you come across that driveway against the building, which is a beautiful building, but is quite massive. Now you have this low scale, and when I mean low scale, is not tree scale, against this swarming, and I thought, what happened to continuing with some of the tree scales in that western planting area?
I just felt it was a much better backdrop for something that really stood out, like an accent, like had a sculptural quality to it, as opposed to something like a tree, which is just more of a mass. The trees we really wanted to save for the parking area because to provide the shade to those that park or are using the parking area. I saw that white wall more as a backdrop for something really sculptural, like the Indian fig and like the desert spoon.
So the Indian fig at 15 gallon, and you have about 5 or 6 of them against that wall. Mm-hmm. Do you see that maybe about 20 feet apart?
Well, that wall is about, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 80 feet, maybe 80 feet long, mm-hmm. with a slight curve to it, if you mm-hmm. remember. Yeah, so there wouldn't be quite many. They'd be more like between 10 to 15.
So equal number of sort of the cacti, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this, cacti leaves to the white space. So you're going to have an equal amount of negative space in between.
Yes.
Yeah, Indian fig. And then in between that somewhat randomly you were going to put the desert spoons?
That's correct.
Okay. So desert spoon is sort of more radial and then round.
That's
and
correct.
Then, yeah. And so was that sort of a filler in between the?
In some ways, yes.
Okay.
It also, the Indian fig is a medium to slightly darker green, and the desert spoon has that sort of blue-gray quality.
Okay. And then the indigo brush, it's
Indigo
what's in
bush.
front of it.
The bush, the indigo
bush,
bush.
sorry.
Yeah, it's a very low ground cover with very small, soft gray leaves and a purple flower.
Okay. Okay. And then along West Visachino, where you had the existing olive trees, towards Vine Avenue, is that where the trees were damaged and therefore new Palo Verde trees are being
Actually, there's
planted?
only one olive tree on the property today. There were mostly ficus trees in that parking lot.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're not proposing to add any more olive trees, but we are adding the Palo Verde primarily as a replacement for the ficus that were removed.
So all along Visachino right now, up there where is the exhibit, when you start from the left corner, are those olive trees, the two there, and then there's a new Palo Verde in between?
Well, there's one olive tree to the west on that sort of curved piece. And then there are the trees that the ficus are shown in black, and the Palo Verdes are shown in green.
Okay, so the Palo Verde will be in between the ficus trees.
Correct.
Okay, and that combination of infilling with palm trees next to ficus, you've done that before, that kind of composition? Because Palo Verde is more needly, where the ficus is more leafy.
Yeah, it's a light coverage. It's not thick, if that's what you're asking.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So why not continue that rhythm along Visachino? Is that because those ficus trees are fine?
Those ficus trees are fine. They weren't. They were pruned after when Larry began the program after the enforcement issue became apparent. So we show the ficus that we thought were viable, and we went with the Palo Verde because, quite honestly, the ficus is not a sustainable. I wouldn't plant that today. If somebody came to me today and said, "I want a shade tree," that would not be the thing I would recommend. It doesn't conform with the Desert Water Agency nor the Coachella Valley Water District's lush and efficient guidelines. So that's why we went with the Palo Verde.
And so again, the rest of those trees on Visachino are pretty healthy as ficus trees.
Yes. And they've been. I don't know how long they've been there, but they're quite large. So I presume that they're providing some decent shade today, as opposed to down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to close the question. Oh, sorry, one more question, Paul.
Paul, I had a question. Along Vine Avenue and at the corner of West Alejo, it looks to, or appears that symbol are the cassia?
The inside the wall, yes.
Along the edge of the street there, or?
Yeah. Are you referring to where that little red box is?
Yes,
or?
like in number 1.
Yeah. So there's actually a small wall that separates the sidewalk from the landscape area. I think it might be about 2.5 to 3 feet tall.
That's the darker.
A darker line. Yeah. So that landscaped area is actually on the other side of the wall. You will see some of that landscaping from the street, but it's really meant more for the people in the parking lot.
And then between the wall and the edge of the paved area, is it?
Are you referring to, for example, where that number 1 symbol is shown?
Yes.
Yeah. There are some small cutouts there along the sidewalk, between the wall and the sidewalk. That's if you started at that point and then continued, I guess it would be sort of northwest along Vine Avenue. You'll see there are some other. They're not shown on the plan, but there are some other cutout areas that I think David mentioned have at one time, and I think maybe some of them still do, include bougainvillea.
Okay.
And that's what was his recommendation, was for additional planting. That's the space that really isn't on the it's not part of the property, but it's still within the area that that any property owner would be expected to maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Sean, did you have a question? Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Paul. Okay, any comments to be voiced on this project, starting with John?
I'm glad to see a cohesive package that will have interest throughout the year, and I would support it.
Okay. Member Tom Dorsey.
When I look at the photographs, you know, of the building and the architecture, and I think Paul had mentioned it when you were talking about the west side of the building. I see the building as kind of a backdrop to the landscape. There's various levels of raised planters that are at different heights and at different lengths that kind of create this horizontal elements, and then it steps up to the building itself. And what I would like to see is those areas. I think in the first photo that you opened up with on the entrance, it's almost like the turf area created this plain, which these raised planters, you know, start to rise out of and move back and forth and up and down at different levels. And I think my concern is that some of the plants, as it's laid out or designed, will not reinforce that. I'm looking at using these forms as more of a backdrop, and that the planting be done with different levels of planting that would reinforce, you know, the architecture and create and use the architecture more as a backdrop and silhouette some areas. So, you know, I think it's a great palette and it's all within the water efficiency, but I don't know if you really need to cover every square foot. I could see, you know, even an illustration like this where there could be just the rock with some boulder groupings and maybe no plants. And then, you know, the raised planters almost need to be addressed in terms of reorganization and cleaning those up, but not try to maybe cover the whole site. And I think Paul alluded to it on the west side, using that blank wall as a backdrop. And I see some other opportunities here maybe to use the elevation of the building in a similar way.
Interesting. Okay. Member Robert.
I really like that idea. Only other comment I would have is I would agree with David's recommendation, staff's recommendation about planting long vine.
I think what Tom's saying is we're probably going to all agree with that. I felt like it was just a bit of a shame that none of those raised planters were being addressed currently in this submittal. The planting along West Alejo now, also the way it's shown proposed on the plan, feels just a bit underwhelming, and I'm not sure what to do about that. I know when you get down to the corner, and Paul, you were bringing up something about a wall, and most of that planting will be enjoyed from the parking lot side of the wall. I wonder though, is there an opportunity for some underplanting underneath those palm trees that are existing there that might be enjoyed from both sides of that wall? What I'm seeing here currently looks like quite a few of the red yucca, elephant food, all pretty low growing things, and not seeing much else popping up above that. Some of the feathery senna, which I'm guessing is acting as a hedge along the north and east sides of that wall there. Not sure. I mean, I guess it is a fine plan. All the all the species seem to meet the criteria for water efficiency. Some of the groupings, I think, just lack a little interest to me, and I wonder if maybe seeing those in relation or larger vignettes, studies of these different planting areas, in addition to the planting plans for the raised planters, it might be nice to see all that together, thought about as a whole, in conjunction with each other.
Member Kenny?
I think perhaps the comment that you just made about the along West Chino Drive, I'm just going to go. I was thinking that Paul is probably looking at, and team there is probably looking at working with what they still have and trying to put the emphasis where they really need it right away. I'm going to assume that the same thing is happening with the planters, because I know that they're being budget conscious about this, so they're probably trying to do it in steps and phases that they can afford to do it. Obviously, replacing all the turf first and the items that didn't survive. So that's kind of where I was thinking. Ideally, yes, one would put a little more into it right up front, but that's probably a budget issue. I also agree with the staff recommendation that planting something along the west side outside the wall would be more desirable. But other than that, I think it looks pretty
good. Hey, Member Tom.
David, could we see the slide again of the elevation along? Yes. Looking at the two existing palm trees that are between the sidewalk and the raised planter, on the landscape plan, you're showing an elephant tree on each side of those palms. And I question that there's not enough space for that multi-branch tree to function there without blocking the sidewalk. And so I want to go back to Maria's comment that on the west side of the building, where there is that very large blank wall, might it be better to cluster those elephant trees in 2 or 3 clusters there to get some height, but don't march them along in the very regular order of equal amount of tree and equal amount of wall. But I think you'd get such a much better impact from that very unique species by kind of giving it its own planter there. Granted, it would mainly benefit the people coming from the parking lot into the temple, but still, I think they're the ones that are proud of this building and want to really be able to experience the uniqueness of it. So that would be my one main comment. Other than that, I like the plant palette very much, and it'll be a great improvement for the neighborhood.
So I think we all appreciate and are enamored with the building. And the significance of it here in Palm Springs. And I think we want to get these comments. I know you're in a hurry, and I know that you want to get going with the improvements, but because it's such a significant building, we want to take the time to understand, okay, how does the planter look with the rest of the improvement in such way that maybe you don't need as many, and in such way you can group in a little bit differently to make emphasis to certain areas. And what I'm hearing is that, and to my suggestion is that right now the planters is such a big design to the building. It's terracing between the sidewalk level to actually the building level. That to me, if not designed or looked at it together, we might be missing a big step here in composing the building. That's the concern that I have. I understand with the palette and how it's been placed, but I think we're in the right place. We just need one more stretch in order to compose it all together. So at this point, what I like to ask the applicant is that is the planter design too far away from this improvement?
we've begun to make changes in the planters, and it would be one of the very, I mean, it's a very practical issue. We have a approved application that there's a vacancy. I totally understand. We're really under the gun to complete phase 1 of the landscape plan in order to get essential funding from the water agency to do this work. I know that this is not ideal, and I think that we can certainly address the issue of the planters in the course of redeveloping the landscape. And obviously that requires either some level of trust from this committee or some ongoing interaction between the committee and Paul and myself. And I really don't know how you all commonly deal with issues like this.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Okay.
Madam Chair, what I might suggest is perhaps we could do this as a conditioned approval such that the raised landscape planters come back to the AAC at a future date.
Yeah, but it's a catch-22, so they're going to start on the improvements on the lower level. If that improvement such that is too dense compared to what's going on the planters, then does the planter change? Does the planter composition change? I think that's what I'm contemplating. Any other ideas? Yeah.
To an idea. I don't know if this helps with funding, but I know from experience it certainly helps with construction. It might be possible that we approve major trees now, and that would, free up a majority of the main arteries for irrigation, lighting, tree planting and purchasing. Shrubs could come back at a later time. Just trying to be creative. Does that help?
Well, because it's a landscape,
Okay.
yeah. If it was clearly divided between building and landscape, we can do that. But I wish it's a good suggestion, but I wish, because irrigation and the other come all together. I don't think, I don't know how Paul could separate the two. But I think, Sean, from what you're saying is that what I gathered was something like this. I think there was commentaries about West Alejo Road, the foreground that is being designed, that in comparison to the planters, there may be more planting than what is needed. Or the planting is too sort of, how do I say it, too equally spaced. And so therefore, can David understand that what we're trying to do is have the foreground planting be more in composition to the planter and not a separate design, the planter design and then the lower level design, that these two should be composed together? And could we give David those directions so that when they're out there placing it, they could be more sensitive with Paul on placing it better? That's one. That's one idea. The second comment was about the elephant trees being too tight to the location of the existing palm trees. So therefore, finding a better place for those elephant trees where there's room around it. rather than being between the back of edge of sidewalk and then the side of the wall.
Madam Chair, question?
Yes.
When you look with this slide that's up here now and you look at the plan, it almost looks like one of the elephant trees is at this larger turf area, almost in front of the sculpture. So I was wondering if, again, that's going to take away, if there's enough room, as Member Jakeway had brought up, if you envision that, you know, in this elevation, if that is going to be too large. And then there's another one, again, down by the Palm. So along that street frontage, there's 4 of them. So that's my concern, that's what's shown on the plan works well with the architectural elevation.
Yes, Member Tom.
I don't think we can separate the planters from the other landscape, and this is a great example. To see that trailing, maybe natal plum or something coming out of that planter, that's going to reflect very strongly on how it relates to what's planted in front of those walls. So I think they really need to be reviewed together.
Okay, so let me try again. In the project, one of the recommendations is for the project to come back with what is being planted on the planter so we can see in composition, and then have Paul and Larry regroup so that now is being designed with the planter. That's one suggestion. Or 2 is that we also send it to subcommittee so the subcommittee can guide that effort as well.
I throw a third request out there. Yep. The scale of this, I'm having a little bit of a difficult time at this 1:20 scale. This is a pretty large site, and I think as these planners come back, I think the scale of these should be a little more focused. 1/8 inch at a minimum. It would include the planters and then what's going on in the foreground in front of it. So that didn't relate to either of your 2 suggestions, but it's just an add-on. Mm-hmm. If I scale some of these now, I see like 20-foot diameter or maybe 3/4 of that, which I think is not going to be completely accurate.
Member Tondos, did you wanted to add?
I was thinking of another option. Could the project be separated between the parking lot area and the building itself? So if they needed to get started, you know, with the parking lot area, because that seemed to be a consensus there, and then the building portion could come back.
So the parking area with the additional comment from David about additional planting.
Yes.
Let that be a condition, and then have the landscape around the building come back with the planter design. Shaking his head no. Okay, so I think we need to make a motion, and then I think we need to vote on it based on our discussion. I think the applicant made a plea as far as time, but this is our first time that we've seen this application as well. So with all factors taken, is there a motion for this project?
I'd like to move that we continue this item and ask that on the resubmittal, we see the planting that's in the planters included in that submittal, and that all of the areas around the building, we get drawings that are of a larger scale so that we can accurately understand the size of the plants and the relationship of the plants to each other.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a
I'll
second?
Second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
I just want to know if that is going to risk the applicant's funding from DWA if we continue this item.
I think we closed, let's close the the voting, and then I think we need to have David answer that question.
Actually, the applicant needs to answer that question, not staff.
Okay.
Yes, it will put the funding at risk. I don't know. I think we're on a very tight schedule right now. I don't know whether there is any possibility to get a continuance from Desert Water Agency. So I do not know whether we can go forward. In terms of why we are not interested in starting at the parking lot, which was one of the suggestions, the DWA essentially carved out the area along Alejo Road as the area, and the area just to the west of the building as the areas of the project that they were willing to fund under the buyback program. And because we're in the midst of a budget year, that's really where we have to start. We don't have the resources to both release the funding that we have been promised from DWA and also start on a different part of the project. These are just difficult realities that we're trying to live with.
Thank you, Larry. I think we need to move on.
Okay.
Well, based on that, then my vote would be no on the motion, because I don't think I actually voted yet.
Okay. Okay. All right, let's go to the next case. Devon Self-Storage for a minor architectural application for the installation of desert landscape within located along Rosa Park Drive with a main address of 500 West Radio Road. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. This is a project that is related to a code enforcement action against the Devon Storage. This area is approximately 550 feet long that runs along Rosa Parks between the wall, which is the back portion of the self-storage, and the street. So in this picture that we have before you, you'll see that there are several existing palm trees that are there and are to remain. In this picture, you'll see that there are some other Palo Verdes and other boulders and tree stubs that are still, tree stumps that are still existing. All of those will be removed except the existing palm trees. And what will be replaced with is the plans that are on the board, which are included in color, which shows the color of the rocks and boulders and rubble that is proposed. And then on this board, it gives you a perspective of what the streetscape would look like. So they're proposing to include 9 existing fan palms to remain, the addition of 9 tupo trees at 24-inch box size, clustered in 3 locations along the street frontage, with other plants to include aloe, century plants, desert spoon, lantana, and bougainvillea, all at 5-gallon size. The scope also includes the installation of 3/4 minimus decomposed granite as ground cover in a DG color, desert gold color, and rock beds consisting of 4-inch to 6-inch rubble in a honey quartz color, and then 1 foot to 3 foot size desert gold boulders buried 1/3 of the total mass in the ground. All the existing irrigation will be removed and replaced, and a new drip and bubbler system will be installed. So the proposed plan generally is consistent with the city's guidelines, meeting what Desert Water Agency's guidelines as far as the types of plants and the water use. So in your staff report, there is an aerial photograph that kind of highlights where the area is, that you can see the length that is along Rosa Parks Road. The applicant is here, and that concludes my report.
Okay, questions for staff? Yes, Member Tom.
I'm confused. I'm looking at the vicinity map, and this property on the vicinity map doesn't touch Rosa Parks Road, so there's something that's not accurate.
Well, the vicinity map I have shows it touching Rosa Parks Road.
No, the project site itself.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct. It is. You're correct. It's the box that's up to the north.
The square, right?
The square.
Yeah, it says PD and then the
Right.
square. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's these two parts.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions for staff? The applicant here, thank you for waiting. Please come up, your name and address, and we promise to make it quick.
Hi, my name is Albert Saldivar. I reside at 500 West Radio Road. That's the place of business as well.
I'm sorry, what was your address?
500 West Radio Road.
Oh, okay. All right, questions for the applicant? Yeah, I'll get started. Okay, so your choices on the Tijuana tree on the 24-inch boxes, would you be open to one of the three changing it up to 36-inch so there's variety?
I mean, I'm open to whatever you think is best.
Okay, it's the, okay. In addition to that, where you have the sweet acacia in between where the new proposed trees are in the bougainvilleas, because it's by itself and it's a 15-gallon, also would you be open to to pair up and add one more on each side?
Go ahead and do that.
Okay, all right. Other questions? Yes, Member Tom.
What is the ground cover again between the plants? It's a golden gravel?
I'm not too familiarized with the type of gravel they're going to be using.
I'm sorry, I see it here now. 4 to 8 inch honey quartz rock.
That's only on the
that's on the dry
darker,
street
yeah.
bed, creek bed.
Right. It's a desert gold color, and there's a picture of it up on the board, on the very.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, is that the ground cover? I mean, is that the field cover or is that the dry bed wannabe cover?
My understanding. The GA, is he here? Is Johnny here?
He's not here.
Okay. Johnny was here earlier, the landscape designer. So my understanding is that the decomposed granite is a gold color, which would be the fine, and then what's up in the corner is a 3/4 inch, which would form the rock beds.
And you got it right because it says here on fine print. So sorry about that. 3/4 inch. Desert gold. Okay. Other questions for the applicant? Okay, Member John.
At the bus stop, with the locations of the trees, can you make sure there's some minor adjustments that the bus stop will be provided shade as the installation happens?
Want shade on there?
Yeah, you've got some trees right behind it.
Uh-huh.
Just make sure the layout of the trees when they grow, not at installation, but when they grow, that the canopy will provide some relief for those out there at the bus stop.
Sure.
Okay, Member Tom Dorsey, comments, questions?
I had a question. From the photo that's up now, is there any mounding or berms along the frontage, or is that just from the photo, blow sand or photograph?
It's just all sand.
Just all sand.
Yeah.
My thought is there an opportunity if you're putting in the rock that there could be, you could use some of that cut and fill to try to create some long, elongated mounds or just some movement so it's just not a flat landscape area.
Okay, so you want, what you're saying, you want some mounds on there? You just don't want it flat?
You could create some low points, yeah, some high points, and, work that in with the boulders. I think my other comment would be, I have a little bit of concern about the tipu tree, just with wind damage in that area, that maybe palo verdes or ironwood or some other type of stronger desert tree might be more appropriate.
Oh, ironwood. Thank you, Tom. So, on the mounding suggestions, because when you're putting the bigger size rocks, the 4 to 6 inches honey quartz, you're gonna have to grade, you're gonna have to excavate, so you get additional dirt to use it towards the mounding, so you don't have to export anything. Or sort of recycling your own dirt, to create these mounds. So on the Tipuana trees, would you be open to ironwood type of trees?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, Sean, go ahead on record. Yeah.
I was going to throw out or just reiterate the size requirement and raising that from a 24-inch box to a 36-inch. They seem open to it. I think changing the species or adding to the species or minimizing this and encouraging an addition of 1 or 2 species, particularly ironwood or something like it, would be great. I think we may want to define a little bit more of a stricter specification for the berming. And so not just leaving it as loose as whatever you export or
you mean shape it?
Shape it, maybe a height requirement, a distance requirement, a quantity requirement, whether it's 2 on this east half of the plan and 1 on the west, third, 2 on the east 2/3 that we're looking at, a certain height, 2'6", 2 foot distances, 40 feet, 30 feet, something more along those lines.
It seems to me where he's trying to build a dry bed, because he has the more lower ground cover shrubs, that maybe he can build it up so it could be more visible from the street, and then let the other areas be the trunk of the trees.
Yeah, and maybe the berming helps with some of the drainage required that helps with some of these plants, both positive and negative drainage. More water at the bottom, vice versa. That's all I have.
Okay. Glenn, did you understand that?
Right. So I have a couple things. The Tipu trees, one of them Tipu trees to be 36-inch box. Add a sweet acacia on each side. Place the trees by the bus stop to shade in the future. The mounding to possibly come back as a subcommittee showing where the mounds will be, the height, the distance. And then swap out the Tipus to ironwood. And I think I heard 36-inch box, some 24, some 36.
Yeah, I think variation of 24 and 36 is good. They don't have to be all 36. Yes, Member Tom.
And the ironwood is just a suggestion. As you look in one of the photos, there's some Palo Verdes further down the street.
Right.
So maybe Palo Verde is the appropriate tree to create kind of just something that would withstand the wind better than the Tipuano.
I mean, personally, it's because I love Palo Verde, but there's so much of it in Palm Springs that, if we can introduce a new palette, that would be great. I mean,
and it could be a combination.
That's true.
Of ironwoods and Palo Verdes and.
Okay.
And there's different varieties of Palo Verdes that do better in the wind. These museum hybrids tend to grow so fast, and some of those are the ones you see blowing over. So there's the Prey Cox is another variety, and blue Palo Verde, and some of those withstand the wind much better.
Subcommittee to review the mounding, are we good with that? Okay, all right. So having said that, I think there's a motion brewing by Member Sean.
Make a motion to approve with all the comments aforementioned included.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
By Member Kenny. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 2 members for subcommittee. Member John and Member.
I guess we're meeting on that other one, so we can do both projects.
Member Tom Dosey. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, the subcommittee was, did you say John or Sean?
No, John.
Tom?
And
John McCoy and Tom
Okay,
Dorsey.
thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Can I throw something out there?
What was that?
Just want to throw something out there. You guys know where the subcommittees is normally
An
via
email.
Email.
But sometimes there are times where
There are
gather
times.
together. Yeah.
Typically, it's an email circulated.
And just a comment, I think it was brought up by Member Sean and Mr. Jakeway about the scale of the plans, or at least having them labeled. You know, it's hard to tell when they're reduced to 11 by 17, those symbols. So you're trying to match the symbol with the plant palette to kind of figure it out. And I agree, if it was a larger scale would be helpful.
I think that the
called out.
request is that they're supposed to be submitting 24 by 36 or larger plans. And so if there's not a graphic scale that measures like what's 5 feet, 10 feet, and then that whole plan gets reduced to 11 by 17, it's hard to tell what is 5 feet, what is 10 feet. So if there's a graphic scale together with the exhibit, when the plan gets reduced, then we'll be able to tell. I know that the staff is on the applicant to get them to, and what we probably see is maybe 2 to 4 versions of requesting additional information. But at some point, I think they need to submit it to us. So, and then we make the call to say it's difficult to read. It's difficult to assess the size of planting that you're proposing.
Or can't read it at all. I couldn't see on all right, trying to remember which project. It was the first one
Library?
Yeah, the library. I couldn't see one existing tree on any of those plans. So, yeah.
Or even when they're on the board, like behind, is helpful. And I think what we're going to see even on the community center is that some of the plants, you know, like a natal plum, is probably showing much larger than it actually will grow to.
Size of a tree, yeah. So I think just to reiterate, I think the staff also knows is that on landscape plans, we want to see windows, we want to see doors, so that we know what is going into the building and coming out of the building, what are going to be the views from the buildings, so that we can locate we can see it in composition to the building, as well as scale plans and materials being shown in realistic sizes. Yeah.
And since you're here, how do you guys feel about what we're saying? Because I think that we're saying maybe it could be a bit stricter with what the requirements are, and I'm sure some of this is like pulling teeth to get to where we are today.
It is. It is. As Chair Song has indicated, the drawings you see are typically 3 or 4 iterations after what has been submitted. One of the things to think about is moving to an electronic format. Is that one of these days I hope to get to having an electronic format so that we don't actually have paper packets coming to you in the future. One of the problems that we still have to figure out, though, is having drawings at a scale electronically where you can see them. Right now, in terms of the PDF format, it's still difficult for some of you to get them at a scale where you can actually see something that's really workable. So again, we take that into consideration as we work with applicants. Many times with these code enforcement cases, though, it's difficult to get the product that we really want. So again, we are cognizant of that, and we appreciate your ability to try and decipher details where it's not always evident. And we do work with applicants to try and get materials that can actually serve a purpose of being evaluated.
Okay, any additional comments? Yeah, Member Tom.
I just need some clarification on the process of the subcommittees. Sean and I last week or last meeting, we're put on the subcommittee for landscaping up at Pinnacle Point. Who initiates the conversation? Is it staff or us?
Yes, staff will initiate that conversation, and we'll either schedule a meeting in person or else a meeting via email. Sometimes we can do those types of subcommittee discussions via email, but staff will initiate and will contact you when the applicant is ready to move forward.
Any additional comments? If not, Director, do you have any comments?
I do. We failed to introduce Commissioner Maruzzi.
Again.
Mr. Maruzzi was appointed to the Planning Commission earlier this year, January?
November of last year.
Oh, November of last year. And this is the first time that we've had you at AAC?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was here at the beginning of the month.
But
and another time previously.
Okay. So we just wanted to introduce Mr. Maruzzi.
It wasn't for the benefit of them. It was for the benefit of the vast hordes out there.
Okay. We do have a planning commissioner here every month, so anyway, thank you. That's all I've got.
All right, and then the schedule for November with the holidays.
Yes, so far we only have one meeting scheduled for November. We'll try and stick with that if we can, unless we start to pile up on the number of items scheduled for the November 5th agenda. Then we may need to do a second meeting if we can obtain a quorum. But at this point in time, it's just the one meeting in November.
Very good. Thank you very much. It's 5:30 and we're adjourned.